The mountain's daughter waited in the cabin he bought, holding a secret promise. The rifle barrel pressed cold against Jake's temple before he even dismounted. He froze, one boot still in the stirrup, hands slowly rising from the reins. A woman's voice came from the shadows of the cabin porch, sharp and unforgiving. "You're 3 days late. I was starting to think you weren't coming at all." Jake turned his head carefully, catching sight of her in the fading light. She was younger than he expected, maybe 25, with dark hair pulled back tight and eyes that held no mercy. The Winchester in her hands never wavered. "I bought this place fair and square," Jake said, keeping his voice steady. "Paid gold coin to a man named Henry Walsh in Denver. He said it was empty. Henry's been dead 2 months." She stepped into the light, and Jake saw the resemblance immediately. Same sharp jawline, same deep-set eyes. "I'm his daughter, Claire, and this cabin wasn't his to sell." "Then whose was it?" "Mine. My mother left it to me before she died. Henry had no right, but that didn't stop him from gambling away everything else we owned." The rifle lowered an inch, but her fingers stayed on the trigger. "So here's how this works. You turn that horse around and ride back where you came from, or I put a hole in you and tell the sheriff you were trespassing." Jake studied her face, seeing the exhaustion beneath the anger. The cabin behind her looked weathered, smoke rising thin from the chimney. Through the window, he could see the flicker of a small fire, barely enough to heat the single room. "When's the last time you ate something hot?" he asked. Her jaw tightened. "That's none of your concern. I've got supplies on my pack horse. Enough for 2 weeks. Coffee, bacon, flour, beans." He nodded toward the second horse trailing behind his mount. "Split it with me and I'll ride out at first light. Keep it all if you put that gun down and let me water my horses." Claire's eyes flicked to the pack horse, and Jake saw the hunger there. She was starving, probably, had been for weeks. Whatever Henry had left her with, it wasn't much. "You try anything and I won't hesitate," she said, finally lowering the Winchester. "There's a stream around back for the horses." Jake dismounted slowly, leading both animals toward the sound of running water. His neck still tingled where the rifle had touched skin. This wasn't how he'd imagined starting his new life in the Colorado mountains, but then again, nothing had gone as planned since the war ended. The cabin was smaller inside than it looked, just one room with a stone fireplace, a narrow bed, and a table with 2 chairs. Claire had the rifle propped against the wall within arm's reach as she watched him unload his supplies. He set half of everything on the table, then started preparing coffee. "You always give away your food to strangers?" Claire asked. "Only the ones pointing guns at my head." Jake struck a match, lighting the kindling he'd added to her dying fire. "Besides, you're not really a stranger. If I'd known Henry had a daughter, I never would have bought this place. Man didn't mention you once." "That sounds like Henry." Bitterness crept into her voice. "He was good at forgetting I existed, especially after Mama died." Too busy drinking and playing cards to notice his own daughter, Jake poured water into the coffee pot, saying nothing. He'd seen plenty of men like Henry during the war, good men broken by grief or violence, unable to find their way back to living. "Why here?" Claire asked suddenly. "This mountain's got nothing. No gold, no silver, barely enough flat land to graze a dozen cattle. Why'd you buy a cabin in the middle of nowhere?" "Because it's the middle of nowhere," Jake said simply. "I spent 4 years surrounded by thousands of men, all of us killing each other over land none of us would ever own. When it ended, I just wanted silence." Claire nodded slowly, understanding passing between them. "You were at the war. Most of it. Tennessee, Georgia, Virginia, all the places that don't matter anymore." He handed her a cup of coffee, steam rising between them. "Lost my family's farm while I was gone. Bank took it for unpaid taxes. So I took my discharge pay, came west, and started looking for a place to disappear. And stumbled into my life instead." Claire wrapped both hands around the cup, warming her fingers. "The universe has a cruel sense of humor." Before Jake could respond, a horse whinnied in the darkness outside. Not one of his. The sound came from down the trail, accompanied by the creak of saddle leather and low voices. Claire grabbed the Winchester, all pretense of relaxation gone. "Get the lamp," she hissed. "Now." Jake blew out the light, plunging the cabin into darkness except for the glow of the fireplace. Through the window he could see shadows moving between the trees, at least 3 riders approaching slow and careful. "Friends of yours?" he whispered. "The opposite." Claire's voice was tight with fear. "They've come 3 times in the last month. Say Henry owed them money, and now I have to pay his debts." Jake moved to his saddlebags and pulled out his revolver. The weight of it felt familiar in his hand, muscle memory from the war taking over. How much does he owe? $500. Money he lost playing poker before he died. The rider stopped 50 yards from the cabin. A voice called out, rough and confident. Claire Walsh. We know you're in there. Time to have another conversation about settling accounts. The man who owed you money is dead, she shouted into the darkness. His debts died with him. You need to leave. Laughter echoed from the trees. That's not how it works, sweetheart. Debt passes to family. You're his daughter, so you're liable? Or what? Jake called out, making his presence known. Silence fell. Then the voice came again, harder now, suspicious. Who's that? Someone who bought this cabin legally and doesn't appreciate visitors showing up after dark making threats. Jake kept his revolver ready. You've got no business here. Right on. This doesn't concern you, stranger. It does now. The woman's under my protection. Jake let the words hang in the cold air. You've got 30 seconds to mount up and leave. Another long silence. Then came the sound of horses shifting, men conferring in low voices. Finally, the voice called out one more time. This isn't over, Claire. We'll be back. And next time, we'll bring more men. The shadows moved away, hoofbeats fading down the mountain trail. Jake kept watching until the sounds disappeared completely. Only then did he lower his revolver and turn to Claire. She was trembling now, the rifle shaking in her hands. They'll come back, she whispered. They always come back. I know, Jake said, which means we've got work to do. Dawn came cold through the cabin window. Jake woke to the smell of fresh coffee and found Claire already up, dressed in worn trousers and a man's shirt, her hair braided tight. She had the Winchester disassembled on the table, cleaning each piece with practiced efficiency. You know your way around that rifle, Jake observed, rolling up his bedroll. My mother taught me before she got sick. Said a woman in the mountains needed to know 3 things: how to shoot, how to survive winter, and how to spot a liar. Claire looked up at him, her eyes sharp in the morning light. So far, you're passing 2 out of 3. Which 2? I'm still deciding. She reassembled the rifle in smooth, quick movements. There's coffee in the pot. We should talk about what happens when they come back. Jake poured himself a cup and sat across from her. Outside, his horses grazed in the small meadow behind the cabin, content and unaware of the danger circling. Inside, 2 people who'd been strangers yesterday began planning like partners who'd worked together for years. How many men does Silver Ridge have? Jake asked. The saloon's run by a man named Vincent Cole. He's got 8 or 9 men working for him, mostly enforcers who collect debts and keep his gambling operation running. The 3 who came last night were Danny Scott, Pete Martinez, and a big man they called Dutch. Claire traced a pattern on the table with her finger. Danny's the talker, but Dutch is the dangerous one. He killed a man in a fistfight last year. Sheriff didn't do anything about it. Because Cole owns the sheriff? Because there is no sheriff. Silver Ridge is too small and too far from anywhere that matters. Cole's the law there, and what he says goes. She met Jake's eyes. My father played cards at his saloon every week for 2 years. Lost more than he ever won, but Cole kept extending credit, kept him coming back. By the time Henry died, he owed more money than this whole mountain's worth. Jake sipped his coffee, thinking, $500 is a lot for a small-time gambling operation. Either your father was a terrible card player, or Cole was cheating him. Both, probably, but Henry was too drunk most of the time to notice. Bitterness edged her voice. After Mama died, he just gave up, stopped caring about anything except the bottom of a bottle and the next hand of cards. How'd he die? Claire's jaw tightened. They say he fell off his horse riding back from Silver Ridge one night. Broke his neck. But I found him, and Jake, he had bruises on his face that didn't come from any fall. Someone beat him before he died. You think Cole's men killed him? I think he couldn't pay, and they made an example of him. She stood, moving to the window to look out at the mountains. But I can't prove it, and even if I could, there's no law to take it to. So they buried him, and then they came after me to collect what he owed. Jake joined her at the window, studying the approach to the cabin. The trail came up through thick pine forest, offering plenty of cover for anyone approaching. The cabin sat in a small clearing with the stream behind it and steep slopes on either side. Defensible, but only if they prepared properly. We need to set up a perimeter, he said. Tripwires with bells. Maybe some false trails to confuse them. If they come at night again, we need warning before they're on top of us. And if they come during the day with all 9 men, then we hold the cabin and make them pay for every inch they try to take. Jake turned to face her. But I'm hoping it doesn't come to that. There might be another way. Claire raised an eyebrow. What way? I ride down to Silver Ridge and have a conversation with Vincent Cole. Man to man, without guns involved. Maybe we can settle this without bloodshed. You're joking. Claire stared at him. You walk into his saloon, and you'll be lucky to walk out alive. He'll just add you to the list of people who owe him money, or worse. But if I don't try, we're sitting here waiting for a war we might not win. Jake moved back to the table and sat down. I've got money, Claire. Not a lot, but enough to make a deal. Maybe I can buy out your father's debt, negotiate something Cole will accept. Why would you do that? Because I told you last night you're under my protection now, and because fighting is the last resort, not the first. He leaned back in his chair. I've done enough fighting for 3 lifetimes. If there's a chance to solve this with words and money instead of bullets, I'm going to take it. Claire shook her head slowly. You don't know what you're dealing with. Cole isn't reasonable. He doesn't want money as much as he wants control. He runs Silver Ridge like his own kingdom, and he doesn't like people who challenge him. Then he's about to meet someone who doesn't care what he likes. Jake's voice went cold. I've faced men who thought they were kings before, Claire. They all bled the same when the shooting started. Cole's no different. They spent the rest of the morning preparing. Jake rode down to the stream and gathered stones, building small cairns along the trail that would serve as markers and obstacles. Claire strung thin wire between trees at ankle height, attaching small bells that would jingle if disturbed. They created false paths leading into thick brush and deadfalls, places where riders would have to slow down or risk injury. By noon, the cabin was as ready as they could make it. Jake cleaned his revolver and checked his ammunition, while Claire did the same with the Winchester and an old pistol that had belonged to her mother. They worked in companionable silence, the kind of quiet that comes from shared purpose. Tell me about your mother, Jake said finally, breaking the stillness. Claire's hand stilled on the pistol. Why? Because you loved her, and because this cabin was hers. If I'm going to risk my life defending it, I should know what I'm fighting for. Claire was quiet for a moment, then began speaking softly. Her name was Margaret. She came from Missouri, followed a man to Colorado during the gold rush in '58. The man died of fever before they struck anything, but Mama stayed. She was tough, tougher than anyone I've ever known. She married Henry a year later, had me the year after that. Was Henry good to her? At first, he worked hard, built this cabin with his own hands, started running a trap line. We had good years, the 3 of us up here. Mama taught me to read from the Bible and an old book of poems she'd brought from Missouri. Henry taught me to track and hunt. Claire smiled faintly at the memory. It wasn't an easy life, but it was ours. What changed? Winter of '63. Henry went down to Denver for supplies and came back different. He'd seen recruitment posters, heard about the war, wanted to go fight, said it was his duty. Mama begged him not to go, told him his duty was to his family. They fought for weeks. Claire's voice dropped lower. Finally, Henry promised he'd stay, but something broke in him that winter. He started drinking, started gambling. By the time Mama got sick 5 years later, he was barely the same man. And she left you this cabin? In writing, signed and witnessed by the preacher from Silver Ridge, she made me promise I'd keep it no matter what. Said it was the only piece of the world that was truly ours, and I shouldn't let anyone take it. Claire looked up, her eyes bright with unshed tears. That's the secret promise I've been holding. Not just to keep the cabin, but to prove that something my mother built could last, could matter, that her life meant something. Jake felt the weight of those words settle on him. This wasn't just about debt or property. It was about memory, about honoring the dead, about proving that love and sacrifice weren't wasted on the wind. Then we'll keep it, he said firmly. Whatever it takes. Claire nodded, wiping her eyes quickly. When will you go to Silver Ridge? Tomorrow morning. I want to see this Vincent Cole face to face, take his measure. If he's reasonable, maybe we end this peacefully. If not, at least I'll know what we're up against. Jake stood and moved to his saddlebag, pulling out a leather pouch. There's $200 in gold here. If something happens to me, you take it and head to California like you planned. Don't try to fight them alone. Nothing's going to happen to you. Probably not. But I learned a long time ago to plan for the worst and hope for the best. He handed her the pouch. Just in case. Claire took it reluctantly, her fingers brushing his. The contact lasted only a moment, but something passed between them, an acknowledgement of trust and shared risk that went deeper than words. "Be careful," she said quietly. "Cole's men will recognize you from last night. They might not let you leave. Then I'll make sure they regret trying to stop me." Jake picked up his revolver and checked the cylinder one more time. But I'm betting Cole's smarter than his enforcers. He'll want to hear what I have to say. They spent the evening fortifying their position further, stacking firewood into makeshift barriers near the windows and door. Claire showed Jake where her mother had hidden a storm cellar under the floor, accessible through a trap door beneath the bed. It was small and damp, but it would hold supplies and provide a last refuge if the cabin was overrun. Night fell again, and they took turns keeping watch. Around midnight, Claire woke and took over watch, sending Jake to his bedroll. He fell asleep quickly, the exhaustion of preparation and tension finally catching up with him. When dawn came again, Jake was already awake, preparing for the ride to Silver Ridge. He cleaned up as best he could, wanting to look presentable rather than threatening. This was diplomacy, not war. At least it would start that way. Claire made breakfast, bacon, and the last of some bread she'd baked days before. They ate in silence, both knowing that this meeting could determine everything that came after. "What will you say to him?" Claire asked as Jake saddled his horse. "The truth. That Henry's dead, that the debt died with him, and that continuing to pursue his daughter is both illegal and unwise." Jake tightened the cinch and checked his saddlebags. "I'll offer him $100 to close the books. Call it a settlement. If he's a businessman, he'll take it. And if he refuses, then I'll make sure he understands that coming after you again means going through me, and that I'm not the kind of man who goes down easy." Jake swung into the saddle and looked down at her. "But I'm hoping it doesn't come to that." Claire handed him the Winchester. "Take this. You'll look less like you're coming to talk if you're unarmed, but keep it on your saddle. If things go bad, you'll need it." Jake secured the rifle in its scabbard and nodded his thanks. The morning sun was just clearing the mountain peaks, painting the world in shades of gold and shadow. "I'll be back by nightfall," Jake promised. "If I'm not back by midnight, you take that gold and ride for California. Don't wait, don't look for me. Just go. You'll be back." Claire stepped close to his horse, looking up at him with absolute certainty. "You're not the kind of man who breaks promises, I can tell." Jake wanted to believe her, wanted to be that man she saw. So he nodded once and turned his horse toward the trail that led down the mountain to Silver Ridge. The ride down took 3 hours, winding through pine forests and rocky passes. Jake saw signs of deer and elk, tracks in the mud near streams, but no sign of human passage. The mountain felt empty and vast, as if he and Claire were the only people for miles in any direction. But as he got lower, closer to where civilization pushed into the wilderness, he started seeing evidence of other lives. Stumps where trees had been cut for lumber, old campfire rings, a rusted tin can beside the trail. The mountain was being claimed, slowly but surely, by people pushing west in search of fortune or escape. Silver Ridge appeared around a bend in the trail, a collection of maybe 30 buildings clustered in a narrow valley. A single main street ran through the center, lined with a general store, a church that looked abandoned, 2 saloons, and a handful of houses. Smoke rose from several chimneys, and Jake could see people moving between buildings. At the far end of the street, the largest building bore a sign for Cole's Palace. It was 2 stories tall, freshly painted, with elaborate trim that looked out of place among the rough lumber of the other structures. This was where Vincent Cole held court, where he ran his gambling operation and controlled the town. Jake tied his horse outside and walked through the front door. The interior was dim after the bright sunlight, and it took a moment for his eyes to adjust. The saloon was bigger than it looked from outside, with a long bar on one side, tables for cards scattered throughout, and a stage at the back where a piano sat silent. A few men occupied the bar, drinking even though it was barely past noon. They all turned to look at Jake as he entered. Behind the bar, a thin man with slicked hair and a neat vest watched Jake with calculating eyes. "Help you with something, friend?" "I'm looking for Vincent Cole." "That's me." The man set down the glass he was polishing. "And you are?" "Jake Mercer. I bought Henry Walsh's cabin up on the mountain. I understand there's some confusion about a debt he owed." Cole's expression didn't change, but something cold flickered in his eyes. "No confusion at all. Henry owed me $500. He died before he could pay. Now his daughter owes me." "Simple as that. Except it's not simple, and she doesn't owe you anything." Jake kept his voice level, conversational. "Debt doesn't automatically transfer to family members. That's not how the law works. Not even out here." "The law." Whew. Cole smiled thinly. You see a courthouse in Silver Ridge, Mr. Mercer? You see a judge or a sheriff? No, you don't. Because we make our own law here, and our law says debts get paid one way or another. Jake studied the man, seeing what Claire had described. Cole was in his 40s, clean-shaven and well-dressed, more businessman than outlaw. But there was steel underneath the polish, a hardness that came from years of getting his way through force and intimidation. I'm prepared to offer you $100 in gold to settle Henry's debt, Jake said. That's fair compensation, more than you'd likely collect otherwise. Cole laughed, and the men at the bar joined in. 100? Friend, you don't understand how this works. Henry didn't just owe me money. He owed me respect. When a man borrows from me, he's making a promise. Breaking that promise has consequences. So this isn't about money at all? Oh, it's always about money. But it's also about making sure everyone in Silver Ridge knows that Vincent Cole keeps his word and expects others to do the same. Cole leaned forward on the bar. So here's what's going to happen. Claire Walsh is going to work off her father's debt in my establishment. She'll serve drinks, entertain customers, and after a year or two we'll call it even. No. Excuse me? I said no. Jake kept his hand away from his revolver, not wanting to escalate yet. Claire's not working for you. She's under my protection now. So if you want to collect from anyone, you collect from me. $100, take it or leave it. Cole's face hardened. You're making a mistake, Mr.
Mercer. A very serious mistake.
I've made worse ones and survived. Jake reached into his coat slowly, pulled out a leather pouch and set it on the bar. There's $100 in gold. Take it, and this ends peacefully. Refuse it, and you're declaring war on someone who knows how to fight one. The saloon went silent. Even the men at the bar stopped drinking, watching to see what Cole would do. Jake could feel the tension rising, feel the moment balanced on a knife's edge between resolution and violence. Cole stared at the pouch, then at Jake. You think you can come into my town, into my saloon, and threaten me? I'm not threatening you. I'm offering you a way out that doesn't end with people getting hurt. Jake met his eyes steadily. Take the money, or tell me right now that you're refusing so I know where we stand. For a long moment, Cole said nothing. Then he reached out, picked up the pouch, and tossed it back to Jake. I don't take charity, and I don't forget disrespect. You've got until sundown to get out of Silver Ridge. After that, you're trespassing on my property. Jake caught the pouch and tucked it back into his coat. And Claire? Still owes me. I'll give you one more day to bring her down here to settle her account. If she's not standing in this saloon by tomorrow noon, my men ride up that mountain and bring her down. And they won't be gentle about it. Then I guess we understand each other. Jake backed toward the door, keeping his eyes on Cole and the men at the bar. You come after her, you come after me. And I promise you, Cole, I'm not afraid of you or your men. You should be. Cole's voice was ice. Danny, show Mr. Mercer out. One of the men at the bar stood, and Jake recognized him from the night before. Danny Scott, the talker. He was younger than Jake had thought, maybe 25, with a cocky smile and a gun belt worn low on his hip. This way, friend. Danny gestured toward the door with exaggerated politeness. Jake walked out into the sunlight, Danny following close behind. The street was empty now, everyone having retreated inside when word spread that there was trouble at Cole's palace. You're either brave or stupid, Danny said conversationally. Most men don't talk to Mr. Cole like that and walk away. I'm not most men. That's what they all say. Danny's smile faded. Listen, I don't have anything personal against you, but if you're still on this mountain tomorrow, we're going to have problems. Serious ones. Then you can take your complaints up with me directly. Jake gathered his reins. And you can tell Cole that if he sends his men up that mountain, some of them won't come back. Maybe all of them. He kicked his horse into motion before Danny could respond, riding back up the street and out of Silver Ridge. Behind him, he could feel eyes watching from windows and doorways. Word would spread fast about the stranger who defied Vincent Cole and lived to ride away. But Jake knew this wasn't over. He'd failed to negotiate peace, which meant war was coming. The only question now was when and how prepared they'd be when it arrived. The ride back up the mountain felt longer than the ride down. Jake kept checking his back trail, making sure he wasn't followed. He half expected Danny or one of Cole's other men to come after him, but the trail remained empty. Claire was waiting on the porch when Jake rode into the clearing. She had the Winchester across her lap and stood as he approached, reading the answer in his face before he said a word. Dad praised, she said flatly. He refused. Jake dismounted and led his horse to the stream. Worse, he made it personal. Said this isn't about money, it's about respect and control. He wants you working in his saloon to prove a point to everyone in Silver Ridge. So we fight. We fight. Jake unsaddled his horse and turned to look at Claire. They're coming tomorrow at noon with all their men. Dutch will lead them. And from what Danny Scott said, Dutch isn't the type to take prisoners or accept surrender. Claire's jaw set in a hard line. Then we make this cabin a fortress and we hold it. We've got high ground, good cover, and we know the terrain. If they want a war, we'll give them one they won't forget. Jake nodded slowly, impressed by her resolve. No tears, no panic, just cold determination. Margaret had raised her daughter well. They spent the rest of the daylight hours preparing. Jake rode back down the trail and found good ambush positions, places where the path narrowed between rocks or trees, where a single shooter could hold off multiple attackers. He marked these spots in his mind, planning their retreat back to the cabin. Claire prepared the cabin itself, stacking furniture against the walls for cover, filling every container with water from the stream, and laying out ammunition where they could reach it easily. She opened the trap door to the storm cellar and stocked it with supplies, creating a fallback position if the cabin was breached. As the sun set, they sat together on the porch, eating cold beans and hardtack, neither with much appetite. The mountains stretched out before them, beautiful and indifferent. "Do you think we can win?" Claire asked quietly. Jake considered the question carefully. "I think we can make them pay dearly for trying. Whether that's enough to make them give up, I don't know. But I know we're not surrendering, and we're not running. This is your home, your promise to your mother. We defend it. You could still leave. This isn't your fight." "Yes, it is." Jake looked at her, seeing the woman who'd held a rifle to his head 2 days ago, who'd faced threats alone for weeks, who refused to break under pressure. "I made it my fight when I decided to stay, and I don't abandon my partners." Claire met his eyes, and in that moment something shifted between them. It wasn't spoken, wasn't defined, but it was real. "Thank you," she said simply. "Don't thank me yet." "Wait until we survive tomorrow." They took turns keeping watch that night, but neither slept well. The knowledge that violence was coming made rest impossible. When dawn came, they were as ready as they'd ever be. Jake positioned himself down the trail at the first ambush point, where the path ran between 2 large boulders. Claire stayed at the cabin with the Winchester covering the last approach. If Jake could stop them or slow them down, she'd have a better chance. The sun climbed higher. 10 o'clock came and went. 11. Jake watched the trail below, seeing nothing but hearing everything. His nerves were wound tight, adrenaline making every sound sharp and clear. At 1:45, he heard them. Hoofbeats on the rocky trail, multiple horses moving at a steady pace. They weren't trying to be quiet. They were coming openly, confident in their numbers. Jake counted 9 riders as they came into view around the bend. Dutch was in front, a massive man with a thick beard and cold eyes. Danny Scott rode beside him, along with Pete Martinez and 6 others Jake didn't recognize, all of them armed. They stopped about 50 yards from Jake's position, surveying the trail ahead. Dutch raised his hand, and the group fell silent. "Jake Mercer," Dutch called out in a voice like grinding stone. "We know you're up there. Mr. Cole sent us to collect Claire Walsh and settle this debt. You've got one chance to step aside." Jake stood up from behind the boulder, his rifle aimed at Dutch's chest. "You've got one chance to turn around and ride back to Silver Ridge. After that, people start dying." Dutch smiled, showing teeth stained with tobacco. "1 man against 9. Those are bad odds, friend. I've faced worse." Jake's finger rested lightly on the trigger, and I'm not alone. Claire's up at the cabin with a rifle in a clear line of sight. "You try to rush me, some of you die here. The rest die at the cabin. Maybe." Dutch shifted in his saddle. "Or maybe you're bluffing and we ride right over you. Only one way to find out." The standoff held for a long moment, tension thick in the mountain air. Then Danny Scott spoke up, his voice carrying an edge of nervousness. "Dutch, maybe we should reconsider. Cole didn't say anything about facing an armed defense. Cole said bring the girl back. That's what we're doing." Dutch never took his eyes off Jake. "Now, mister, Mercer here is going to lower that rifle and step aside, or we're going to make him regret the day he rode into Silver Ridge." Jake's answer was to pull the trigger. The shot echoed through the mountains like thunder. Dutch's hat flew off his head, spinning away into the brush. The big man froze, realizing how close he'd come to dying, while his horse danced nervously beneath him. "Next one's through your skull," Jake said calmly, already levering another round into the chamber. "So what's it going to be?" For a moment he thought Dutch might actually retreat. The man's face had gone white under his beard, and several of the riders behind him were backing their horses up. But then Dutch's face flushed red with rage, and Jake knew diplomacy was over. "Take him!" Dutch roared, spurring his horse forward. Jake fired again, this time aiming for the nearest rider. The man screamed and fell from his saddle, clutching his shoulder. Jake dove behind the boulder as return fire kicked up dust and splinters around him. Bullets ricocheted off stone, whining into the forest. He fired twice more, forcing them to scatter and take cover. This was the crucial moment. If he could hold them here, make them afraid to advance, they might give up. But if they realized he was just one man and rushed him all at once, he'd be overwhelmed. Then he heard the Winchester crack from up the trail and another rider fell. Claire was in the fight now, exactly where she was supposed to be. Caught between two shooters, Cole's men were pinned down, unable to advance or retreat without exposing themselves to fire. "Fall back!" Dutch yelled. "Get to cover!" The riders retreated back down the trail, dragging their wounded with them. Jake counted heads quickly. They'd taken down 2, maybe 3 more injured. That left 6 or 7 still capable of fighting. Better odds than 9, but still dangerous. Jake waited until they were out of sight, then ran back up the trail toward the cabin. He needed to regroup with Claire, reload, and prepare for the next assault. Claire met him at the cabin door, her face pale but determined. "Did we stop them?" They're regrouping down the trail. Jake reloaded his rifle with quick practice movements. "We hurt them, but we didn't break them. They'll come again, probably try to flank us through the forest this time. How long do we have?" "Not long. Maybe an hour." Jake looked around the cabin, checking their defenses. "We need to decide now. Do we hold here and fight it out, or do we retreat into the storm cellar and hope they give up searching?" Claire shook her head immediately. "If we hide in the cellar, they'll burn the cabin. I know men like Dutch. They'll destroy what they can't have. Then we hold." They positioned themselves at opposite windows, covering both approaches to the cabin. Jake kept his eyes on the trail while Claire watched the forest to the sides. The waiting stretched out, minutes feeling like hours. "Jake?" Claire's voice was soft. "Yeah? My mother made me promise to keep this cabin, but she also made me promise something else. She said when I found someone worth trusting, someone who stood by me when it mattered, I should hold on to them. She said people like that were rarer than gold." Jake turned to look at her, seeing the weight of that confession in her eyes. "I think she'd have liked you," Claire continued, "and I think maybe I found what she was talking about." Before Jake could respond, gunfire erupted from the forest. Bullets shattered the window beside him, spraying glass. He dove to the floor and returned fire blindly, trying to suppress whoever was shooting from the trees. More shots came from the opposite side. They were surrounded, caught in a crossfire. Jake crawled to where Claire was hunkered down behind overturned furniture. "They're on both sides," she shouted over the noise. "We can't hold both windows. Storm cellar. Now." Jake grabbed supplies while Claire returned fire, giving them cover. "We'll let them take the cabin, wait them out below." They retreated to the trap door, Jake providing covering fire while Claire descended into the darkness. Then he followed, pulling the trapdoor shut above them and sliding the bolt home from underneath. The storm cellar was cramped and damp, barely tall enough to stand in. Above them, they could hear boots on the cabin floor, men searching, furniture being overturned. "Anyone down there?" Dutch's voice filtered through the floorboards. "Come out now, and we'll make this quick." Jake and Claire pressed against the far wall, weapons ready, not speaking. If Dutch found the trapdoor, they'd have one chance to fight their way out. Heavy footsteps moved across the floor directly above them. Dutch was standing right on top of the trapdoor. Then came the sound of him striking a match. "Burn it," Dutch ordered. "If they're in here, smoke will drive them out." "Dutch, wait." Danny Scott's voice, uncertain. "Cole wanted the girl alive. If we burn them out, we might kill her. Then she dies. Either way, the message gets sent." The smell of smoke began filtering through the floorboards. Jake heard the crackle of flames, felt the temperature start to rise. Dutch was burning the cabin to the ground, with them trapped beneath it. Claire grabbed his arm, her eyes wide with fear. They had minutes before the fire consumed the cabin above and the heat became unbearable. If they stayed, they'd suffocate or burn. If they emerged, they'd be walking into guns. Jake looked at the woman beside him, the woman who trusted him with her mother's legacy, her secret promise, her life. "When I open that trap door, you run for the stream," he whispered urgently. "Don't stop, don't look back. Get to the water and follow it downstream. What about you? I'm going to give you time to run. Jake checked his revolver. I'll draw their fire. Keep them occupied. Claire's voice was fierce. We stay together. That was the deal. Partners. Partners trust each other to do what needs to be done. Jake put his hand on her cheek. Your mother made you promise to hold on to people worth trusting. Well, I'm trusting you to survive this. Tears tracked down Claire's face, but she nodded. Above them, the fire grew louder. Smoke was getting thicker, making breathing difficult. They were out of time. Jake positioned himself beneath the trapdoor, took 3 deep breaths, and then shoved it open with all his strength. The cabin was a furnace, flames licking across the walls and ceiling. Dutch and his men had retreated outside, watching the fire. Jake came up shooting, his revolver barking 3 times. 2 men went down before anyone could react. Then everyone was shooting, bullets flying everywhere. Jake felt something punch him in the side, hot and sharp, but he kept moving, kept firing, driving toward the door and away from where Claire would emerge. There, someone shouted, and Jake saw Danny Scott pointing toward the stream where Claire was running. Leave her! Jake roared, putting himself between the men and Claire's escape route. You want someone to kill? I'm right here. Dutch turned toward him, his face twisted with rage. You should have taken the deal, Mercer. I did take a deal, Jake said, his revolver empty. Just not with you. He charged Dutch barehanded, closing the distance before the big man could bring his gun to bear. They collided, crashing to the ground in a tangle of fists and fury. Jake fought with everything he had, knowing he just needed to buy Claire a few more seconds. Pain exploded in his side where he'd been shot, but he ignored it, driving his fist into Dutch's face. The big man bucked him off and scrambled for his dropped gun. Jake lunged after him, but his body was failing now. Dutch's hand closed on the revolver. He turned it toward Jake, his finger tightening on the trigger. Jake braced for the impact. The shot never came. Instead, Dutch's head snapped forward, and he fell face first into the dirt. Behind him, Claire stood with the Winchester smoke curling from the barrel, her face streaked with tears and soot. I told you, she said, her voice shaking but firm. We stay together. The remaining men from Cole's group stared at their fallen leader, then at Claire and Jake, and made the smart choice. They ran for their horses and rode hard back down the mountain. Claire dropped the rifle and ran to Jake, catching him as he collapsed. You're hit. How bad? Bad enough. Jake pressed his hand to his side, feeling the blood. But I'll live. You saved me. We saved each other. Claire tore strips from her shirt, binding his wound. Just like partners do. Behind them, the cabin burned, Margaret's promise and legacy turning to ash. But in the ruins, something new was being born. Trust forged in fire, partnership tested by violence. We need to get you down to Silver Ridge, Claire said, helping Jake to his feet. Find a doctor. Vincent Cole. What about him? He needs to know this is over. His men are dead or scattered, and you're not paying any debt. Jake leaned on Claire. This ends today. They made their way slowly down the mountain, Jake on his horse with Claire leading it. By the time they reached Silver Ridge, the sun was setting. The streets were empty, everyone hiding indoors. Claire tied the horses outside Cole's palace and helped Jake down. They walked through the door together, both covered in soot and blood. Vincent Cole stood behind the bar, clearly not expecting to see either of them alive. His face went through several expressions: surprise, fear, anger, calculation. Your men are dead, Jake said. His voice weak but clear. Dutch, Danny, Pete, and 4 others. The rest ran when they realized they couldn't take us. Cole sat down his drink carefully. You killed them. They gave us no choice. Claire's voice was steady. They came to our home. They shot at us. They tried to burn us out. We defended ourselves. This isn't over. Yes, it is. Jake straightened, pushing away from Claire's support to stand on his own. You've lost half your men. Your reputation's in tatters, and everyone in Silver Ridge now knows you can be beaten. If you keep pushing this, we'll go to the territorial marshal in Denver. We'll bring charges for attempted murder, arson, extortion. You'll hang. Cole's face flushed red. You think you can threaten me? I'm not threatening you. I'm giving you facts. Jake pulled out his revolver, not aiming it, just showing it was still loaded. Henry Walsh's debt is paid in blood. His daughter owes you nothing. If you ever come near her again, I'll come back here and finish what started today. For a long moment, Cole stared at them, weighing his options.
The few men in the saloon watched silently. Finally, Cole nodded once.
The debt's settled. Claire Walsh is clear. He poured himself another drink, his hands shaking. But you two need to leave Silver Ridge today. I don't want to see either of you in this town again. Agreed. Jake holstered his revolver. But understand something, Cole. If anything happens to Claire, if she has any trouble from you or anyone connected to you, I'll hold you personally responsible. And I know where to find you. They left the saloon without another word. Outside, the sun had fully set and stars were beginning to appear. Claire helped Jake onto his horse, then mounted her own. Where do we go now? She asked. The cabin's gone. We rebuild. Jake looked up at the mountains, at the place where smoke still rose. It'll take time, but we'll build it back stronger. Your mother's promise still stands, Claire. The land's still yours. The cabin can be replaced. Our cabin, Claire corrected. We're partners, remember? Jake smiled despite the pain. Our cabin, then. And this time, we'll build it right. With strong walls, good defenses, and a future worth protecting. They rode slowly back up the mountain. Two people who'd started as strangers and become something more through violence and trust and shared survival. Behind them, Silver Ridge settled into uneasy peace, and Vincent Cole poured himself another drink, knowing he'd been beaten. But ahead of them, in the darkness of the mountain forest, lay the ruins of what had been and the promise of what could be built in its place. The smoke had cleared, the fire had burned itself out, and in the ashes waited the foundation for something new. Claire looked at Jake, seeing the determination in his face despite his pain. You really think we can do this? Build it all back? I know we can, Jake's voice was certain. Because we're not alone anymore. We've got each other, and that's worth more than any cabin, any amount of gold, or any piece of land. Your mother was right about that. People worth trusting are rare, and when you find them, you hold on. They reached the clearing as the moon rose, bathing the burned ruins in silver light. The cabin was gone, but the stream still ran clear, the meadow still stretched green beneath the stars, and the mountains still stood eternal around them. This was home. Not because of what had been built there, but because of what they'd defended together. This was where two people had found each other in the wilderness and decided that was enough reason to stay. Claire dismounted and walked to where the cabin had stood, kneeling to touch the still warm ashes. In the ruins, she found something. A small metal box, scorched but intact, buried beneath the rubble of the fireplace. She opened it carefully and found her mother's Bible, singed but readable, and the deed to the land, her mother's handwriting still clear. Look, she said, showing Jake. Some things survived the fire. Jake slid down from his horse and joined her, his hand finding hers in the darkness. We'll survive it too. We'll build back what burned, and we'll make it last. For your mother, for us, for whatever comes next. They stood together in the ruins, looking up at the stars and the mountains and the vast sweep of the Colorado sky. Tomorrow they'd ride to Denver, get Jake's wound properly treated, and start making plans. They'd buy lumber and supplies, hire help if they needed it, and construct a new cabin on the old foundation. But tonight, they had something more valuable than plans or materials. They had each other tested and proven through fire and violence and trust. They had a partnership forged in the hardest way possible, strong enough to build a future on. Thank you, Claire said softly, squeezing his hand. For what? For staying. For fighting. For keeping your word. She looked at him, her eyes bright. For being the kind of person my mother told me to hold on to. Jake pulled her close, carefully because of his wound, and they stood there in the ruins of what had been, looking toward what would be. The mountain's daughter and the soldier seeking peace, bound together now by shared danger and earned trust, and the promise of something better waiting to be built. Above them, the stars wheeled slowly across the sky, indifferent and eternal. But here on Earth, in the small clearing in the Colorado mountains, two people had found what they'd been searching for. Not peace, not yet, but the possibility of it, the foundation for it, built on ashes and blood and the willingness to stand together. That would have to be enough. And somehow, standing there in the moonlight with Claire's hand in his and the mountains watching over them, Jake thought maybe it was more than enough. Maybe it was everything. Tomorrow they'd start rebuilding. Tonight they'd survived. And in the space between survival and what came next, they'd found something worth all the pain it had cost. They'd found home, not in a place, but in each other. The mountain's daughter had waited in the cabin he bought, holding a secret promise. But the real promise, the one that mattered, was the one they made to each other in the ruins of that cabin. To stand together, to rebuild together, to face whatever came next together. Some promises are spoken. Others are written in blood and ash, and the quiet understanding that passes between two people who've seen each other at their worst and chosen to stay anyway. Those are the promises that last, the ones that survive fire and violence and all the tests the world can throw at them. Jake and Claire had made that kind of promise, and as the night deepened and the stars grew brighter overhead, they began the long work of keeping it.